Hello, my name is Jeppesen. Lately, I've spent my last years training teachers, organizing different courses, all related to teaching English as a foreign language. And today, we're going to deal with some ideas referring to mixed ability and multi-level classes in the English foreign language classroom. So, where do we start? What are multi-level classes? How can we define them? Obviously, they're classes with students who really differ, and among others, in levels of previous knowledge and experience, maybe in gender, age and maturity, interests and motivation. This always happens. And then, of course, we have the ones who differ in personalities and aptitude to learn. In other words, mixed abilities. So let's define what large multi-level classes are. They're usually about between 25 to 30 students in most parts of the world and up to 60 students in China and India, for example. But today we'll be dealing with large multi-level classes of around 30, 40, 45 children in the class, or adults also. So what are mixed abilities? We've just mentioned that. Well, there are many theories and it's really ongoing. So what we're going to mention here are the very, very basics of it. Like, for example, the theory with the multiple intelligences. The first one, Gardner, who came up with the intrapersonal, the interpersonal, the logical mathematical, the linguistical, the musical, the spatial, and the kinesthetic bodily one. And then learning styles, which is, I think, the one that appears most in most books, talking of the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. And also, lately, they have added learners who prefer learning in groups, learners who prefer individual work. Then we have the reflective and the impulsive. The reflective needs time to digest the knowledge and probably even write it, while the impulsive prefers producing it immediately. So from our point of view as teachers, we have advantages, but we also have great challenges. What are our advantages? Plenty of students for interaction, variety of human resources to discover, and the roles they play, because every classroom we have students who play different roles. Again, we have students who learn to work in groups and become partners in learning if we help students to become more independent, and they can learn also at their own pace. So we do have plenty of advantages. As a result of this, professional development occurs very naturally. How about the challenges? The feeling of being trapped in the problems of management, building an effective self-access center in the classroom, that's a very interesting idea. Finding appropriate teaching resources and material, nowadays there are plenty. Ensuring all students are challenged and interested, that's quite a challenge. And enforcing English-only policies when working in pairs and groups, how can we manage that? But there are ways of trying to better it. So, where can we start? Suggestions? All right. By making sure that they have the functional language they need in the classroom. We have just spoken of the possibility of them having the language and using English in the classroom. We have to make sure they have the language to do it. We can do it by encouraging them to become more autonomous, being more responsible for their learning. We should have classroom rules, especially if they are children, or classroom agreements from adolescents up. Even some adults need classroom agreements. We must get to know them. We can start off by finding out about their characteristics and needs, by creating motivation. For this, we have to consider their needs and their interests. A good idea is to establish a learning routine, setting clear goals and sharing them with them works very well in some classrooms, not in all. Making sure they all get positive feedback. This is something very necessary. And then looking for sharing and filing resources and materials. Being organized, in other words, helps a lot to know where we have our extra material when we need it. Why start with classroom language and instructions? What are those classroom language and instructions? Always check that the classroom and functional language that the learners will need to communicate, either their greetings, when they say goodbye, asking for clarification, checking information and understanding, that they really need the language. So if they don't have it, it has to be taught. If they have it, it has to be practiced. Make sure also and check that your instructions are clear according to the level of your class. But short instructions always help, easy words, at least for the elementary and intermediate levels. Write them on the board if necessary. Remember that they are also learning through repeating the instructions. The learners have the functional language they need to complete the activity. Check that. Teach them when necessary. And also decide when their mother tongue is necessary and make it explicit. There are situations where it's important. How can we go about rules or agreements in the classrooms or the schools? Here's a little activity that you can share with your students, for example. The aim of the activity is to help learners to be more responsible and to create group cohesion and to review language and modal verbs or introduce them. What can we do? We need to work together with the students on the possible. Here we have some examples, like we must remember our homework, we must bring our book to class. All these examples, very short, very simple, can be worked on in the classroom. How do we do this? Well, there is an easy procedure. We can brainstorm the possible agreements. The learners can discuss them in their groups. You'll have to decide if it's groups of 3 or 4 or more. Usually not more. They don't become so productive. So write out 3 in each group. They share them as a whole class. A secretary can come and write them on the board. Then once you have them all on the board, you can decide together with your students which are, well, the repeated ones obviously get left aside, which are the 3 or 4 or 5 most important ones, but make them very few. Remind them that once the rules have been set, they must be respected, and commit yourself to keep to them as well as a teacher. Maybe a chart with their names and a system of crosses and ticks can be followed together with prizes. Prizes, when I talk of prizes, I'm not talking of a candy. I'm talking of an academic prize, which could be that they put up their work, they are allowed to put up their work on the wall. There are other different things to think of. Now, the recommendation, please consider very few rules, but sustainable, clear, understandable. This will be according to their age, according to their characteristics. And always from the positive point of view. I have set out some examples here on this page, and there are more on the next page. Always from that we can, You can use we must, we have to.